Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, and today I am going to show you some techniques using our brand new blending brushes. Say that 3 times fast. So, our blending brushes come in a pack like this. They come 3 to a pack. And these are high quality blending tools. They have a nice sturdy handle that's also flexible, and a nice large surface area. So it's about 1 inch by 1.5 inches. So nice soft bristles. I was telling some gals earlier, this would be good stress relief. It's so soft you could just pet it for hours. So 3 to a pack, like I said, and there's lots of different ways you can do that, and I'm just going to show you quickly 3 different ways you can do this. The first one I want to show you is color on color. So instead of starting with white cardstock, I'm going to start with crumb cake cardstock. And I pre-stamped a panel. This is 5 1/4 by 4. It's what I consider my standard insert or panel on a card. And I'm going to bring over some scrap paper, some grid paper to work on so I don't make a mess of my work surface. And I'm going to match crumb cake cardstock with crumb cake ink. Now, the first rule of thumb when you are working with blending brushes or really any kind of sponge is check your ink pad and make sure it looks clean. Sometimes these ink pads can be lint magnets. Stuff will float down on them while you're working. If you've been working with glitter or leafing or anything, it might end up in your ink pad. So just take a look at it. If you see anything on the surface, take a bone folder, a plastic spoon, piece of paper, anything, and just kind of scoot that off and out of the way, because if it gets on your blending brush, it will leave marks on your cardstock. So to use your blending brush, the key is to use a swirling motion, and you'll kind of feel how comfortable you are holding the brush. I know some ladies prefer to hold it back by the handle. I like to hold it with a finger up here to just kind of steady the top and give me some nice pressure. So find the way that works best for you. And so to put ink on my brush, I'm going to swirl in circles on my ink pad. And then I'm going to tap it just a little bit to get any excess ink off. And then I'm going to start swirling on my scrap paper and then swirl right onto my cardstock. And this will give you a nice soft look. You won't have any big smears or smudges. So that's why you want to start off the cardstock and then roll on. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, this doesn't look very impressive yet. Just give me a little time. Some inks will pop on the page right away. You'll see that in the next card I do. And some are a little more subtle and just take a little longer to really kind of show themselves on the card. And as I work here, you can sort of see it already. This is starting to get a little bit more darker than this edge here, which is untouched. But you can put as much ink or as little ink on your card as you want. I just kind of want to focus here along my image. Just kind of dress it up a little bit. It looked perfectly fine the way it was without any added ink, but I just wanted to kind of accent it. I've always been a fan of the sort of aged look, like when they used to do the paper with the rough edges that look burnt around the edges. I learned that techniques in Girl Scouts with lemon juice and fire. So this way you don't have to set anything on fire, but you can still give your paper a neat look. Give it a little bit here. Maybe just a little bit more, and then we'll move on, because I know you don't want to watch me do this all day. So I think I'll call that good, and you can see I have been using ink, even though it might look a little invisible. And so to finish this card, all I'm going to do is take a crumb cake base. Here, this might also help you see the difference now that I've added some ink. And I have some of our faux suede trim. This is Early Espresso. So it matches my panel, I think I forgot to mention, was stamped in Early Espresso ink, and it is our Enjoy the Moment stamp set with a sentiment from Peaceful Moments. And a little trick I like to share is if I've got ribbon that's kind of thin and narrow that I'm gluing to a panel, I like to take a little bit of Scotch tape and put it on the edge of my ribbon that I'm tucking behind the card. Nobody's going to know it's there but me, and that way I know my ribbon is not going anywhere. So just like that, a nice little touch. And then a little bit of adhesive. I could also have popped this up on dimensionals. And then just like that, I have a perfectly lovely sympathy card when I need it. It's hard to have sympathy cards. I think are some of they're the worst ones you have to make, but you want to make sure they're pretty. Does that make sense? So there we go. There's a sympathy card with a little color on color. And these will look different every time you make them, depending on how much ink you put on the card. So, all right. Now, if you really want to see ink pop, here is the next card that I'm going to make. And this is adding color to white cardstock. This is using our Simply Succulent stamp set. This is one I have not played with a lot, and I can't wait to really dive into this. There's so many coloring options for this stamp set. You can use markers, you could use colored pencils. We have watercolored pencils. The Stampin' Blends are perfect for emulating the colors in succulents, or tonight I'm going to use the blending brushes. So I have a panel of cardstock that is 4 inches tall by 3 1/4 inches wide. And I'm going to bring over some new colors. I recommend a blending brush for every color family. So the crumb cake one I just used will be more for neutrals. And then I will have one for pinks and reds, greens, blues, yellows. And I'll see if I need any more. So far, out of my 9 blending brushes, I've only put color on 5 of them, I think. So I definitely have room to play. And we'll talk about cleaning them in just a little bit. So same technique as I used in the first card. I'm going to take my ink. This is Rococo Rose. Swirl on. Tap off the excess and roll right onto my cardstock. And these 3 colors, Rococo Rose, Granny Apple Green, and Pretty Peacock, are not colors that I would have thought to put together myself, but they work really well for this particular stamp set. So I'm just gonna, go diagonally here. And I can always come back and revisit that pink if I want. Now I'm going to take my Granny Apple Green. And I will tell you, like I said earlier, some colors pop quicker than others. The crumb cake and the Rococo Rose are a little more subtle. These greens and blues are really gonna explode on the page. So it's really important to tap these off a little bit before you roll onto the page. Because otherwise you can almost see here where I had a little much ink, and it might appear heavier in spots. So just keep that in mind as you're working here. And then I'm gonna add a little Pretty Peacock. And again, this one really pops out on the page too. But I love what a nice soft blended color this gives. And this is one as well that the color will change every time. You can use these same 3 colors and it will look different each and every time. How fun is that? I think I'm gonna bring back, gonna stick my fingers in the ink first. You will get a little bit inky with this technique, I will tell you. So I'm going to come back with a little more Rococo Rose, just kind of bring out that pink. There we go. And now I'm going to do one more thing before I assemble my card. I have a panel of crumb cake that I'm going to attach to a crumb cake base, and I darkened the edges. I'll show you in a minute how I'm going to do that. And I could very easily pop this panel on right here and it would look fine, but I wanted to give it a little something. So I'm going to take a sponge dauber. I think you could probably do this with your blending brushes, but it would be a little more involved, and for this, I think sponge daubers are easier. Tap it in the ink and just flick the edges of your cardstock. And if you haven't done this before, you will very quickly find out the angle you want and that you don't need a lot of ink, but you can add a little more, a little less, depending on what look you're going for. And you can see this is just very quickly changing the appearance by darkening the edges of the cardstock. Whoop. That's okay. I can come back and just add a little more so that doesn't look quite so obvious. So there we go. And then, boy, I'm sticking my hands in all sorts of ink tonight. I'm going to take the largest image from the stamp set. It's Friday and my brain is tired. I'm going to stamp this diagonally. I purposely cut this panel to fit this beautiful stamp at an angle. So I'm using Blackberry Bliss ink. I don't think I mentioned that. And then I'm going to stamp a sentiment here at the bottom. This thanks from that stamp set will fit beautifully. And just like that, I have a lovely panel. And I'm simply going to take the card panel that I stamped earlier with the crumb cake, add a little bit of Stampin' Seal Plus, and this I'm going to adhere flat to the card front, like so. And now I'm going to take some dimensionals. Here they are, they wandered away. And I'm going to put some dimensionals on the back of my blended panel. And I'm going to pop this on the front of the card. And just like that, I have a beautiful thank you card. And I was saying with the previous card, you will get a different color every time that you stamp or that you blend. It all depends on how the ink goes on the paper. So lots of fun, and how pretty are those? So one more technique I want to show you. I want to show you how to add the ink to Designer Series paper. We have a beautiful set of Designer Series paper in our current catalog right now called the True Love Designer Series paper. It features a variety of prints in black and whites. The images, some of them are large florals that you could color with watercolor pencils, markers, blends, but you can also add ink. So what I'm going to do for this is create my own ombre effect using the same technique I've been using with the black and white paper and real red ink. And red, again, is a color that this is going to pop really quickly on your page. So be sure to tap it off and swirl on. And then I like to build from the bottom and work my way up. This is a technique, though, with these blending brushes. You could make beautiful cards with sunset colors or sunrise colors. You could do an ombre in any color, greens, and use dragonflies. This one I'm using real red, and I'm going to add some roses. And so the more ink I put on, the deeper the color will get. And I can lean a little heavier on the blending brush if I want to make it darker. And then, look at that, how pretty is that? And all I did was add a little ink. So one other thing I wanted to show you while we're designing this card is that you can dress up a simple stamp. I have from the Brushed Blooms stamp set a large rose image, which I'm going to stamp here. And that's a perfectly lovely stamp all by itself. But I wanted to show you how you can subtly make a difference with the stamp by using that very same technique that I've been using all throughout this video. And I'm going to take my blending brush, add a little ink, tap it off, and swirl right over top of the image. And you can see just what a subtle difference it makes. So I'm not going to bore you with cutting and stamping multiple roses, but I wanted to share with you that technique and show you a couple different cards. So again, you can see how this comes out differently every time, depending on how much ink you use. And then I did use the technique where I used the blending brush on the image. I layered white on white, which this is a new idea for me. I don't know why I haven't thought of it before. I tend to layer white with another color, but one of my girlfriends layered white on white in a card this morning that I saw, so I thought I had to try it on one of my cards. On this card, I added a little wink of Stella. That's our glitter pen. I don't know if you can catch the little shimmer on these roses here. But very simple, very quick and easy to do. Add a little sentiment to the inside, and I have a card ready to go. I did also want to mention that you can take embossed panels, such as this one. This is a panel that is from our Hammered Metal 3D embossing folder. This was a white piece of cardstock that I ran through our cut and emboss machine using that Hammered Metal 3D embossing folder. And then I took my Rococo Rose blending brush and I just applied color all over. And how pretty is this? Again, I could make it my own ombre design, but I think I'm going to take this and add an image and probably make it a card for a new baby. So lots of different options open for you with these blending brushes. Speaking of the blending brushes, I wanted to let you know how to clean them. There are a couple different ways. You can use your Stampin' Chamois, the same thing that you use to clean ink off your stamps. The brushes will not be white again. Once you've put ink on them, they are going to have that color on them. That's why I recommend having one for each color family. So you can use your Stampin' Chamois to clean them. You can also take a wet microfiber cloth, and once you wet it, just kind of swirl the ink around. I recommend taking your brush and trying to get as much of the excess off the brush before you use your Stampin' Chamois or your microfiber cloth, or you can even run them underwater and then let them dry. The key is before you use them on another project to make sure they are perfectly dry, because otherwise your project is not going to look the same. You won't have that soft blended look. You might have some uneven color tones. So just make sure these are dry before you start on your next project. So I really hope you enjoyed a few tips on how to use our blending brushes. If you've fallen in love with the blending brushes and want to pick up some of your own, please feel free to visit my website at thefaithfulstamper.stampinup.net. You can hop over and visit me on Facebook at The Faithful Stamper. I do videos twice a week there, live on Facebook, and post lots of projects and ideas there. And I hope you'll think about becoming a subscriber to this YouTube channel, Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great night. Happy crafting.